I just want to take a little bit of a bigger picture now as we move into our next panel. We have got a cost of living crisis that is challenging consumers, and meanwhile businesses are facing resource constraints and rationalization. However, this is still an age of opportunity, and investment plays a big role in the sustainability of businesses. So for my next panel, I'm going to be inviting Kirsten Weng, the head of editorial content at Vogue Germany, and Benjamin Messner, the director of e-commerce at Bogner, to share with us how they are investing to win in a cutback economy. Welcome, Kirsten and Benjamin. Hi. Hello, thank you so much for joining. Do you want to jump up here in the middle? And can you grab a mic over there? Thank you so much. You can get that. Thank you. So hi, Benjamin and Kirsten. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello.
Can you just, for the benefit of the room, just give us a one-liner on your role and your journey to Vogue Festival, and then I'll come to you, Benjamin, for Bogner.
All right. So I'm Kirsten. I'm head of editorial content at Vogue Germany. That means I'm responsible for the content on the website and the magazine. And I've been a fashion journalist in this scene around for nearly 20 years. So I've been editor-in-chief of Install, of Cosmopolitan, and of Stylight, where we built an e-commerce magazine from scratch. So yeah.
Thanks, Kirsten. And Benjamin, hi, welcome. Can you just give us a one-liner on you and your role at Bogner?
Hi, and thank you so much for having me. Hope this works. My name is Benjamin Messner. I like technology. I like selling things. I also like sports, so Bogner probably is a good fit for me. I'm the director of e-commerce at Bogner. Joined the company in 2019, and it's been a ride since then. But we're still have many things to accomplish still.
Thanks, Benjamin. I mentioned at the beginning that this has been a really challenging time for brands, but the luxury segment has remained quite resilient, and I saw in recent results that Bogner's revenue for the last financial year is actually ahead of pre-pandemic times now, which is a great result. Can you just tell us a little bit about how Bogner has managed to maintain momentum during such a challenging time?
Well, in general, it's always challenging, and you have new challenges when you think you solve one. We focus on growth in wholesale and digital mainly, and we really want to provide a high quality product. I think that's, it sounds so simple, but I think that's the challenge to be solved first. And then we also need to make sure that we provide entertainment, right? So marketing and maybe you could say Willy Bogner invented content marketing back in the days. So we still have a lot of content that we can use today, a lot of heritage content. Bogner is a 90-year-old brand. We celebrated 90 years of Bogner last year. And so we can use that, but we also need to look forward and need to provide something that gets the attention in all this attention economy. So we do many different things. So we invest heavily in performance marketing. We invest in CRM, but we also do things like a fashion show, which we did in Hofbräuhaus in January, actually, which was 75 years after Maria Bogner had done that for the first time in the exact same venue.
Amazing. Well, you mentioned two things there then, the entertainment elements like fashion shows and then content as well. Kirsten, this is your world, you attending fashion shows, but also as head of editorial content at Vogue Germany, how have you seen brands evolving their content strategies to keep consumers engaged?
I think there's something that you already mentioned, that it's about having an angle to tell stories, to keep people involved. So what we see is a really strong interest in luxury brands in cultural moments. So for example, Gucci became the main sponsor of Gallery Weekend this year. Chanel is very involved into the Berlinale. Max Mara is supporting a foundation in Hollywood, Women in Film. And so different brands supporting different cultural companies, events, happenings, and they keep creating content from this, and they have several of them. So each brand is looking into supporting or being present at different cultural moments, and I think this is something that every brand keeps, or tries to be kept in the conversation.
Thank you so much. I think that actually mentioning that cultural moment is really important because it's something that Vogue Business is investigating as well. We tend to cover sustainability and technology exhaustively, but we see culture as the kind of next front line for brands to tap into. And Benjamin, I noticed on Bogner's e-commerce site, the Bogner World pages, which I think is quite an important asset for the brand, where you're developing more and more entertaining content, even in areas like film. Can you just tell us a little bit about how you're diversifying that content strategy as well?
Yeah, well, the Bogner World is an important part of like the whole ecosystem that we're creating. And if you take a look, it's not where we want it to be yet, of course. But I think it shows that we need one place where we can curate content in the way we would like to do it. But it's only part of it, right? So way up the funnel, we have social media where we need to play content in a different way, make it fit the channels. But then we combine everything in that one place, and then people can go there and see what they would need, and we create it in a way that you can filter for different interests, different things. So even our press releases will go there soon. So this is like one space, but it's just one part of the whole system.
And when I was speaking with Daniel earlier, we spoke a little bit about how quickly brands had to pivot during the pandemic. Was that the same for Bogner? Because e-commerce is such a vital way of reaching consumers and can be quite difficult in those sorts of times. How did Bogner have to respond to that sudden drastic change in the way that we do things?
Well, we didn't really need to pivot in that sense. We already had an existing e-com business that was quite stable, but of course it was challenging. It was like we were the only channel that was able to generate revenue during that time. Kind of survival of the company kind of depended on it. But the team did a great job, and we really created all the processes and systems that we needed. But of course, we could have done more. I think if our technology stack and the whole platform would have been where we wanted to be, we probably could have turned our stores into fulfillment centers. But back then, we weren't able to do that.
One of the changes that I read about was Bogner divesting its headquarters, and that changed the dynamic of some of the teams, which I'm sure would have had a big impact on ways of working, but also opened up new ways of working as well. How did that impact e-com teams and marketing teams from your perspective? And are you now deploying those resources in different ways?
Well, like the divestment of the headquarters was part of a whole, we call it performance program, but it definitely helped to put the company on a more solid foundation. And so this was part of different changes we made. And it certainly helped us to continue investing where we had planned to invest, which was, a lot in technology. And even before the pandemic, we had started a big project to change our whole e-com landscape and basically replace the whole thing, migrating from Magento 1 to Salesforce Commerce Cloud. And this was a big project, and we still needed to finish that and continue that while we had to make sure that we generate as much revenue as we could. And save as much money as we could during the pandemic. But maybe to answer your question on the change, the new building that we now rented is really helping us to work in a different way. And we have like really entirely new building. The teams connect way better from my perspective. Also, they enjoy the rooftop for yoga and stuff. So I think it's really a different way of working now. So we could use that resource in a different way.
I just want to think a little bit about the future, because it can feel like such an uncertain time. What are you prioritizing at Bogner, Benjamin, when it comes to investing in e-commerce and marketing tools?
Well, I would say we still need to focus on fixing the basics in some ways. So still, basic technology things. But then now having this new platform in place since we launched last year in October, it's all about growth, like adding new countries, adding new marketplaces. So we also have a quite strong marketplace business. So I think this on the one hand, but then we also need to get our technology stack to a new level. And that's actually where we are currently in the phase of defining the architecture and making sure we get the project underway.
And I'm not a technical person, so in layman's terms, can you just share a little bit about how you, I guess, test and learn quickly when you're implementing new tools and making sure that they work?
It's not always easy, but I think testing is crucial, is very important for us. So, but on the website, for example, we just started a project with a specialized agency who will help us to continuously do multivariate testing and improve our online store. This is really focusing on conversion rate optimization a lot. But then, on the other hand, I think it's also very important that, well, you have a team that's excited about trying new things, and you let them do that.
Thank you so much. Kirsten, one of the reasons that I think Bogner has thrived is because it has a focus on a specific niche, and you mentioned culture, and obviously it's got this cultural persona of outdoor pursuits and a sense of adventure. And I think that that's something that has really helped Bogner to gain a cult following around some of those activities. Are there any other niches that you can identify in the fashion segment that are starting to attract a new audience and a growing audience?
Absolutely. So what we see is really like on the rise is, for example, shapewear that comes with a fashion sense. So if it's DT by Lisso or if it's Kim's by Kim Kardashian, so these brands really they fill a niche and they fulfill a need and a gap. So I think it's really about these quite niche, as you mentioned, things that are so outstanding still. Or, for example, there are some brands coming from Australia where obviously there is more need than for us in Germany. But, for example, very luxurious rash guards that are designed very fashionable for going to swim. Or, like, recently I saw something that I was quite surprised by, like a fashion brand for moms going to the playground. So, okay, like, so super niche. But well, yeah, for sure. I think this is something that is really quite interesting to discover and to think about for brands, what niche they can maybe find for them.
And also tapping into, I guess, lifestyle moments as well, or life stage moments that you might not necessarily think about. Obviously, Vogue Germany has a huge audience as well. Can you share any pro tips from your background as head of editorial content about how you identify new audience segments and new opportunities when you're shaping up the content for Vogue?
Sure. So I think for us it's all about, we have Vogue is a brand that is absolutely well known, and for us it's about, we come from a background that for sure is the print magazine, but now it's so much more. There is really video is a very important pillar. But for sure there is some events on the Vogue business side, and so it's really developing, and what we try to do is reaching a target group that is not aware about printed magazines. So we all know there is this infamous target group called Gen Z, and everyone is so keen to discover. So what we really did or started in the past, and is one of the first in Germany, was going to TikTok. And now it seems that we really did the right decision. So we have about 1 million followers on TikTok, what is kind of huge in comparison to other German competitors. And so I think it's all about, and for sure these followers on TikTok, they are aware of Vogue and the brand of Vogue, but maybe just some of them would buy a printed magazine. And so I think it's all about transforming, and I think to keep the target group very vivid or to gain new customers, it's about to discover new fields. And I think this is something you really always have to be aware that you think, maybe a few steps ahead.
It sounds like TikTok is a success story for you, and maybe you and Daniel need to have a conversation later about how they can pick up some of those tips.
I'll join.
Everyone will join in that conversation. we're nearly out of time, but I just want to ask a couple more questions and then give the audience an opportunity to ask some questions as well. Change obviously doesn't happen overnight. Normally when we talk about sustainability, that we talk about it in reference to environmental or social sustainability, but we also have to focus on the sustainability of the business as well. As you've been implementing change at Bogner, Ben, how have you done that in a way that has enabled the sustainable operation of the business as well?
Well, tough question, but I think, we had invested in like getting the basics right, getting the architecture right from a technology perspective, making sure we have the right team in place, and then we just go. And I think we try new things, and sometimes we fail, but then we learn, and I enjoy that a lot, and so I think that's how you can keep it like sustainable and stable.
Thanks so much. And Kirsten, what would you advise brands in the room to prioritize as they're considering what to invest in next?
So, I come back to TikTok or social media, because what I really see when we talk with different brands is they are also interested in social media and on TikTok, but they just don't get how important it is. So when I ask who is running your social media channels, it's like an intern or a very underpaid person. And I'm like, okay, so you are quite aware that this is so important, that this is your future, that this is your maybe first contact to a new customer or even to the old customer, and then you have an intern running this channel, so this doesn't make sense. And I think there should be some really rethinking about, you would never ever run your biggest store, your biggest headquarter by an intern. And so you have to really rethink about the value of your social media channels. And so this is something I can just recommend to really take this very, very serious.
So it sounds like the technology and the channels are there, but actually you have to empower people to have that agility and have the right role to make those work for you. Great. That brings me to the end of my questions. Does anyone in the audience have any questions for Kirsten or Ben? I think we may have some roaming mics, but hello. Do you mind just saying your name and where you're from?
My name is Maria Paz Cornish. I work at From Breeze with Daniel. He comes to cheer him up. I have a question for Kirsten regarding this last topic that you talked about not having interns running this very, very important media. How do you do that? Because TikTok and all these trending social media are very new, and it's always something new creating. How do you manage that to put someone with experience, even though it can be, I don't know how to put the question, but it needs to be someone young and on the trends to run this channel, but on the same side, 20-somethings, they don't have much experience, but at the same time, these channels are very new, and everything is coming, like tomorrow is going to come something new, so how can you manage that?
So I think it's not a question about age, it's a question about appreciation. So I think that, as you said, this channel these channels are supposed to be run by a person who is really into it, and this mostly are young people. But to give this person really the responsibility, not just by taking the work, but just really appreciating the work by a really good payment and by really enable these people. I think this is something, and to have a team they maybe can work with, and everybody is involved. So for us, we do not have a huge social media team, but everyone is kind of supporting wherever the team can. And I think this is something that, as I said, it's not about just to have a senior person, but to give a young person the appreciation of a senior person to run this important channel.
Okay, so more empowerment and tools.
Yeah, exactly.
Hi there.
Hi, my name is Glazione. I'm from Naked Fashion. A question for both of you. With changes now in terms of investment, like a lot of companies cutting back investment, how did it impact in your teams, in your content teams? this lack of investment sometimes, or think like not you more in content, maybe you in more in the e-com part. There we have a struggle in terms of hiring or having to let people go. There is something that happened during this time with you?
We were lucky not to have this restriction. I think I would say concerning the content production. But well, to be honest, Bogner is a small company, and we had to work with low budgets all the time. So maybe we're used to it. But I think it's always about creativity and maybe starting with the customer and working backwards and see what do I actually need instead of what do all the competitors do. And I think you have to find your own way. And sometimes you can be successful with low budgets. Oftentimes you're not.
Like reassessing priorities, right? Like somehow.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. So it's all about setting priorities first, and then it's about what you said, creativity. And even a small team can be very creative. And for this, I think it's just important to have the team feel valued and seen and empowered all the time. So because I think creativity is nothing that happens when you are completely stressed out.
If I may be permitted to add to that as well, we do something called the Vogue Business Index, which is an evaluation of the top 60 global luxury brands. And what I've noticed is really interesting is when we evaluate brands for levels of innovation, particularly in tech innovation, but we look at areas like transformation of business models and the metaverse, etc. The businesses that have the biggest budgets and biggest revenue are not the ones that are ranking highest for innovation. It's the ones that are in the between 500 and a billion mark, or between 200 and 500 million, where they've got smaller teams, they're more agile, there's less red tape and process for them to get ideas running, and that's helped them to innovate and actually fail fast as well and figure out what they need to fix. So that brings us to the end of our panel. Thank you so much to Kirsten and Ben. It's been really interesting hearing from two such different backgrounds and different perspectives across e-commerce and content. I think we did bring the art and science of marketing alive in that conversation, so thank you so much.